I've written 109,883 words in the last 7 months and more. And I want to share 7 of the biggest lessons I've gained from that experience. And yeah, lessons that can possibly help improve your own fantasy writing craft. So let's jump right into it. The first lesson is having a rigid calendar is not the way of an artist. What I mean with this is that first, my probably 5 months in to fantasy writing, in my own case, I was obsessed with finding that perfect routine, that perfect writing routine, and the perfect structure with tasks and the amount of time I had to spend for each of those tasks in order to bypass big authors like J.K. Rowling and George R. R. Martin. I thought I could, if I instantly had the perfect routine, I could become much better, much quicker in the start. But the calendar backfired. It definitely backfired because I probably added up to hours of time I've spent on Google Calendar and trying to fix and figure out the best perfect routine. I used AI, Gemini, and ChatGPT mostly to try help organize my calendar routine. But yeah, it backfired. It left me with time. It took time away that I could have spent reading or writing more or doing something that would actually help my fiction craft. So now as a rule of thumb, I don't use Google Calendar anymore. I look at it as my enemy now, not my friend. I instead let the time be fluid. I have a task list with the only essential tasks, meaning I have 1 hour of minimum writing. The thing is, it's not fixed to 1 hour. I have 1 hour where I have to minimum sit at my desk, but then I just let the time fly if I'm feeling I'm in the flow while I'm writing, and the 1 hour ends. And with world building and research, I kind of just ask the question, what does my book series need? And I try to fulfill that need. So maybe I end up reading Harry Potter, the Harry Potter books right there. Or I end up researching in this book right here. And using maybe a bit of AI to interactively figure out the information, etc. Or I world build in this notebook here. So I much prefer this way of living as well. It feels less restrictive. At times it could feel like a prison when I had this strict calendar routine. But yeah, I don't think it's the way of an artist. I think we should let our minds be a little free, follow our curiosity, and I think following our curiosity will be one of the things that leads to the best books, the best series. I don't think, yeah, a calendar kind of kills the joy in writing as well, I figured. So yeah, that's the first point, or the first lesson. The second lesson is deliberately practicing your craft. Sorry for all the shaking here with my phone. Don't got the arm strength. Now, for the second lesson, I didn't really deliberately look back on my scenes. Right now, too, I trying to get into the habit of spending my evening more like analyzing and figuring out what could I have done better. I have mainly been persevering and writing for these 7+ months, but I have no idea if the writing is good. Writing is a subjective form of art, so it might be good. I do believe I've naturally become better due to reading a bit more than I usually did before. I've read Game of Thrones, not the entire thing, but I've read a lot more than I used to do in my teenage years and high school years. So I think I'll naturally become better. But if I deliberately looked back on the text, on the scenes, and took a little closer look, I would have become better quicker. And now I can't tell you how to deliberately like look at your scenes and analyze them, because I actually don't know myself. I know there's different components like conflict, stakes, the character interiority, meaning the inner life of the character, and getting that on the page too. Emotional casualty, but I'm not fully into that. That's something I'm working on currently. For the third point, give me 1 second and I'll check my notes. This is awkward. Subtract based on dopamine levels. That's the third point. That sounds very Andrew Huberman-ish. The subtract your dopamine levels. Basically, what I'm trying to say is to remove all the high dopamine activities, meaning you might be, I'm guessing since you're on self-improvement and want to improve yourself, want to write books, that you don't really eat junk food, etc. All the bad habits that you've heard of. But there is activities like watching a lot of videos that is more stimulating and gives more dopamine, most likely, than, for example, reading a book. It requires much more patience to read a book. And that's one of the ways I've ensured that I want to write more and I want to read more, is to cut out all the noise, all of the activities that don't, it maybe helps me a bit, I feel good, but ultimately don't really help me. For example, I used to watch some Alex Ramosi. Nothing against the guy, he's got great content. Just with the perspective of me trying to become a better writer and having writing as my main priority and goal in life at the moment, watching Alex Ramosi business videos didn't fully relate to me right now. That's the point. Even though there's definitely a lot of people who's getting value from his videos. So just cutting out all of the activities that don't really, kind of gives you just this dopamine boost. I don't know if this makes sense, but in my own head it makes sense. But yeah, cut out all the shit and leave the good stuff left. Now for the fifth tip, a social day equals better writing mornings. So that's something I've figured, that I live at home at the moment and I write in the mornings always, but a few mornings, especially in the first 5 months of this journey of mine, I didn't always focus. I didn't always get that good focus and get into that flow state because I was distracted. My mind hadn't gotten that social need met the last day. So I'm always at the gym. I always go to the gym, go to the city, and that's where I'm typically most social. I talk with people in the sauna, etc. And yeah, whenever I've had a very social day, I've talked with plenty of people, the next morning my mind isn't so spinny, if that's an English word. It's less chaotic and it's more acceptant of being in the solitude in the morning and focusing on writing, because the social need has been met the last day. And then I'll meet it the next in a couple of hours when I suddenly want to be a little more social because of all of the alone work that I'm doing here at my desk. Then I'll then I'll fulfill that need as well. And that's why I've figured that whenever I'm very social in a day, I have better writing mornings. So that's the fourth. The fifth lesson is learning from YouTube mentors instead of relying on AI as a writing coach and mentor in general. So I wish I'd watched more writing videos, especially from, there's a couple of channels. One channel I'm very much into at the moment is she's called Alyssa, and she's a former publisher, traditional publisher from a big publishing house, Penguin something from New York. And she has a lot of good writing tips for people who want to get traditionally published. That's one of my ambitions. And yeah, I kind of relied on AI, ChatGPT, to tell me all the things I had to know when it came to writing. And I don't particularly understood a lot of the things ChatGPT gave to me, and ChatGPT was more of a tool for procrastination, and I didn't pay that much attention always. I used it to try to get a shortcut or a quick bypass, and then I just forgot the information. When I watch Alyssa's videos, I often get action steps that I can implement right away. I can take into when I'm reading like a writer. In that case, looking at the characters, and yeah, it felt much. I wanted to focus more because I watched a video. Yeah. So that's kind of. I've gone over to YouTube mentors instead of relying on AI as a general. Just give me 1 second so I can drink some water. All right. So the 6th lesson is to get very used to uncertainty. When you pick a profession like writing and you want to succeed and create your own books, there's a lot of uncertainty based on, is this draft even good? Is this scene even good? Is it catching? Will people read it? Will anyone care at all? Is this story good? There's a lot of uncertainty that can occur because it's a very long-term project. And I felt that personally. I went to ChatGPT and I used AI to try get that certainty back. But I realized I have to get comfortable in that uncertainty and just push through and go through that hard work. And that's why it's so important, again, lesson 3, to subtract all of the activities that might take you away from writing, taking you away from the important. So that might be distractions on your MacBook. For example, in my case, I used something called cold turkey blocker, that I use to block all the websites that might be a distraction that I might head to when I get uncertain under my drafts. That's lesson 6. Lesson 7 is to actively recall like it's a religion. And what I mean with this is that people, when it relates to writing, I think I could have written better scenes if I had better vocabulary. And I thought that reading and looking at words and understanding what they meant at that time when I recognized them, that meant I'd learned them. But when I got into the drafts, I tried to draft scenes of my own. I wasn't able to retrieve the word and use it and apply it in my own writing. So actively recalling. And this comes down to whether you want to learn words, concepts, or whatever. When you read things, when you read fiction, recalling back to what you last read, or recalling back after you've read a bit. I think that helps the brain a lot, and it gives the ability to actually learn the things. There's a very good analogy I heard from, I believe he's called The Pioneer, a fitness YouTuber on YouTube, and he thought of all the neurons in the brain. There's about 86 billion neurons, and he thought of them as a big forest, but you imagine that forest is limited to 500 trees. And when let's say I learn a new word, let's say defiantly, there's a difference between contextualized memory and real learning. Real learning is often very tough and hard on the mind. And you might believe that one of your trees has grown and grown a little thicker, which means that you've learned something, but time is the judge of learning. Time is the judge of learning. So let's say you're writing, if you don't have that defiantly word in your active vocabulary, that you can't pull it out of your brain and use it on your drafts, you haven't learned it. Yeah, you might recognize it and understand it slightly, but when you've learned something, you can teach it. You can pull it up from your brain, and that's when one of your trees has become thicker. So I don't know if that made sense, but I made it sort of a rule for myself in life to actively recall anything I want to keep on my mind and be able to pull up and teach and use. I want to have the ability to pull it up into my head. And that's what actively recalling words, concepts, whatever does. It trains the ability of pulling things up to the surface when you need them. And in writing, yeah, actively recalling words that you need. I think it's, yeah. So that's lesson 8. Now lesson 7. I hope some of these tips helped you out. And I'm going to create more of these just value-driven videos for my own lessons into the future. So yeah, that's another day into a very long journey for myself and hopefully for you too. Take care.